It's another fresh topic for Two Women Talking. It is I, Leanna Kersner, Tomboy, joined with Song W. Erickson, Girly Girl. And oh my God, I was at a thing last night. My eyes are so crusty. I am a hot mess right now, Song. So it's the topic for the next few episodes. Hot messes in media, when things on a show don't come together. And we're going to primarily be featuring women run media stuff like Gilmore Girls, Mrs. Maisel. I'll throw in The Witcher. I think that show just didn't gel. Now, of course, the big one right now that I have not seen the internet come together in revulsion on a show before, like they have with Mindy Kaling's Velma.
Yeah.
I won't say it's universally despised. I've seen some people enjoy it, or at least pretend to enjoy it. That happens sometimes. But
I'm not sure I want to know people who enjoy it. I'll be honest.
Because it's so mean, right?
Yeah.
It just seems like a high school revenge fantasy that Mindy Kaling came in and pitched. And in typical Hollywood fashion, someone at WB went, yeah, okay, that's great. So do you have any ideas for ScoobyDoo? Right? Because
without ScoobyDoo.
Without ScoobyDoo. And it's this thing right now where, just for background of why these things happen for people, because this is when it's interesting because they can't do the woke conspiracy shit with Mindy Kaling. And so it's like everybody actually has to have an opinion on this one. They can't just line up in their camps, right? Because she's made comments about being kind of conservative, but she's a brown woman and, all that stuff. But, there's no ability to claim some sort of woke conspiracy on this one, because a lot of the lines are, putting the thumb in the eye of the Me Too movement and stuff like that, which I think a lot of people are like, I should like this, but I hate it, right? And that the whole show from start to finish is just, it's a shoehorn, right? They had this idea, they grafted the Scooby-Doo parts onto it, but it's one of those things, why did you make this Scooby-Doo? It's not Scooby-Doo. And it may have just been accepted if it was like Diary of a Mean Girl or something.
And that's like the thing. It feels like it's trying to be, from what I've seen, it feels like it's trying to be Scooby-Doo does River does Heathers.
Yes. Yeah, it definitely feels like they were Riverdaling Scooby-Doo only in a cartoon.
Which it's like the whole point of Riverdaling something is to do the live action part, isn't it?
I don't see the purpose of Riverdaling things.
Me neither.
I tried to watch Riverdale and was so horrified by the statutory rape storyline. And that was one that I think, for some odd reason, American audiences love tawdry things, right? They love getting down in the muck. And so people it's almost like people didn't want to admit what the whole Miss Grundy Archie thing was, because it took away their titillation.
And that's actually something that's really common, especially in media aimed at teen girls, now that I think about it, because Pretty Little Liars, the main character, complete with the fact that the finale is their wedding, is one of the girls with her teacher.
Yeah, I Pretty Little Liars is one of those shows that I really recognize it's well made, but I can't.
It's not, though.
It's for what it is. It's one of the better ones of that. That's a genre that tends to be dismissed as crap.
Okay, here's the thing. Even the fans got fed up with it, because it got to the point where the writer was layering so many mysteries and so many things at the end didn't actually come together and didn't actually make sense. And it was clear that she was just, it's something that's usually really common in serialization, where it's just, okay, I'm going to throw in this thing for a dramatic cliffhanger or this or that. But if you don't actually answer the questions.
That's
And
right.
if your ultimate answer to the especially since it was a whodunit.
Yeah.
And the whole thing was, it was supposed to be all these things weaving together to a final answer that would satisfy all the questions that were set up from episode 1 and throughout the series. And when you get to the point where none of those answers are satisfactory and a lot of things didn't get answered, period, she clearly failed at the whole idea of a whodunit.
Yeah, I mean, that's a problem with serialized storytelling, right? They create their whole structure. The classic example of this was Twin Peaks. The first season was Who Killed Laura Palmer, right? Back in the day. For people who haven't seen Twin Peaks, I love Twin Peaks. I love everything about Twin Peaks. Twin Peaks is a show that I will periodically go back and watch and pick up something different every single time in what David Lynch is doing. But the first season was all about Who Killed Laura Palmer. And once they reveal that the show's second season doesn't really have a reason to exist, and all the weird is kind of flopping around second season, even though I love the tone and I love the mood and I love the performances and just David Lynch doing David Lynch stuff, it does lack a purpose. And you see this in show after show. I mean, Westworld teased the mystery way too long, and to the point that they did sort of a setup for a season 5 that we're not going to get now because they canceled the show. And at this point, I think Westworld lost a lot of people season 3, and they didn't come back for season 4. And the third season of Westworld was a hot mess. I get what they were doing. On paper, it was an interesting idea. It should have worked. It juxtaposed the real world with the world of the park. But the problem was the park with Westworld, with that old West setting. It was a combination of horrible human misery and a beauty and a certain sublime quality. And so the story of Westworld is the story of Westworld. I can't say I wish they hadn't done these things, because that was the point, right? The torture of the hosts and the constant resetting was the point of the story. It's, what do humans do when humanity is not on the table, right? And then the idea that the park was actually training people to do that, a whole bunch of loose ends in terms of ethics didn't go anywhere, right? They tangled up with each other instead of instead of being coherent in that third season. And the fourth season was so tight in terms of what it was trying to say about simulacrum theory and AI ethics, but nobody friggin' watched it, because season 3 was so what, and I think they were having trouble getting some of the actors because what's his name, Jeffrey Wright, the guy who plays Bernard, who's also Commissioner Gordon in the Batman movie, and he's the voice of the Watcher in Marvel What If, and I mean, he's just everywhere, right? So I think they couldn't get him. But that was a show that actually got its shit together, but it was too late. As opposed to some other shows that just have this. I mean, look at Felicity. Back in the day, people blamed the drop off on Carrie Russell's hair, but that second season was so pointless.
And that's the problem you get with a lot of shows, especially ones with a high concept, where they come in and they have a really tight first season generally. But they don't really have a plan beyond that. I mean, another great example is Once Upon a Time.
Oh my Lord. That season 2 had a lot to recommend it, and then it's like they chickened out on a lot of things they wanted to do.
Season 2, I think, jumped the gun with making Cora the villain, because I think there should have been like 4 or 5 seasons total. and Cora should have been the big boss. Like,
oh, for sure.
Every season leading up to that should have been a different villain, but ultimately in the last few seasons you realize Cora is the one controlling everything until the last season you finally get to Wonderland and face the Queen of Hearts.
Yeah, I Barbara Hershey was phenomenal in that part.
Yeah, and she was so underused.
Yeah.
And especially to have the last couple seasons of that.
Oh,
the last 3 or 4 seasons were just
horrible.
They were so messy.
The
lore completely stops making sense.
Well, they instead of completely reimagining the characters, they're just, here's Ariel, here's Elsa, here's there, shut up, oh, God,
Anna and Elsa were the worst example, and I think part of that was just because it was way too soon after the movie.
Well, she's just in an ice cream shop, like, whatevs. Oh, like, that was so bad.
and it's like, throughout season 1 we saw the story of Snow White and Charming, but it wasn't the way you thought,
right?
And that was part of what was so fascinating about it. But then we come in and, oh no, it's just a sequel to Frozen with a prequel element, because we're kind of tying in elements of the fairy tale that were glossed over in the movie itself, and we're doing this whole weird twist, and I'm like, oh my God.
See, I thought
Elsa needed a wig too, because like,
my,
that braid was so pathetic.
Yeah, I mean, okay, 2 things with Once Upon a Time. One, the characters were never allowed to grow because they kept resetting the curse.
Yeah,
they never, you can only do, I mean, everybody, the showrunners didn't read the room on that one, because they had a real ability to say something, one about female leadership, 2 about the whole good girl bad girl thing with Regina, and they just sucked out. And that's why I thought they got cold feet, because that Mulan Adora thing, Aurora is She-Ra, Aurora is Sleeping Beauty, right?
Okay, here's the thing for me. I saw the fans who were like, oh no, they're cheating us, we want Mulan and Aurora. Here's the thing, Aurora already had True Love's kiss.
Right.
For me, if you break them up and put them together then, and put her with Aurora, then you either needed to start with that and have Mulan be the one to wake her up from the curse, or you need to just stop teasing it, because you've already established that this is true love. And if you want to start undermining true love, then it doesn't mean anything. See, and the entire premise of your series falls apart.
I thought it did fall apart after a while.
Well, yes.
Right? Yeah. But I thought they could have done a really interesting thing about, that sexual awakening thing that women experience, where, oh my God, I'm in love with my best friend and I know she's straight. And they could have told a really interesting story about duty and different types of love. I thought they had a real opportunity with Aurora and Mulan to show that friends matter and you can love people without that, sexual component to it, but just let yourself love people. It be selfless about it. Just let it feel good, for fuck's sake. I wanted them to tell different stories of love. So take that concept of true love and extrapolate it to other things.
And I mean, they already started it in a way, because the kiss that breaks the curse is Emma kissing Henry's forehead.
That's right.
It's the love of a mother for her son.
That's right. And but really great friendships, like really great ride or die friendships. That is maybe the one thing in fiction that female focused media does better than male focused media. And I'm not saying that's a good thing. It's just, there's so many stories of like sacrifice with men that it's what Anthony Mackie complained about, that you don't get good stories about male friendships. And I think it's no accident that I would go the same way with Falcon and Winter Soldier that I suggested with Aurora and Mulan, that like one of them's into it, one of them's not, because like, let's face it, that's a reality now. That you know, for the person who does have the unrequited, I'll say crush, because that's usually what it is, right?
Yeah.
And so they have this unrequited crush. Okay, it's not gonna happen. Now what? Right? And there is a way to be mature about it and realize, you know, it's like they did, as hot a mess as this show turned out. It's what they did with Jorah and Daenerys on Game of Thrones. That his feelings for her evolve so much during the progression of the show. And it becomes a truly chivalric relationship, right? Love with her with no expectation that he's gonna do anything about it, but be redeemed by the impulse. And I forget, he's one of my favorite damn characters on that show, partially because he's Ian Glenn, and I have a weakness for Ian Glenn. But I have a weakness for Ian Glenn because he's got that same quality that Christopher Judge has with Kratos. He says not much, but you see it in his face, right? These little flinches, these slight widening the eyes. He knows exactly what he's feeling in every moment, in every scene, and it's amazing.
And that is the mark of a great actor, is knowing how to act with their face.
Yeah.
And that's one of the biggest things you see, especially with younger actors and just actors who don't know what they're doing. Yeah, it's like
the opposite of that is Kit Harrington. And man, he's so pretty, but there's nothing I feel bad for the guy. I think he honestly did not know what was going on with Jon Snow. Jon Snow, you know nothing. Jon Snow was a little too literal there. I think because they didn't know where the show was going, he didn't know how he was supposed to foreshadow things.
And here's the thing. I think Kit Harrington needs to do more voice work, because he's actually really good at voice work. The only thing he's really done is How to Train Your Dragon.
Right.
But it's like, people tell me that they watch Game of Thrones and they watch How to Train Your Dragon and they're like, it sounds exactly the same. And I'm like, no, it doesn't. He has a totally different voice as Eret. And
he has a totally different voice. He's doing an accent in Game of Thrones, because everybody had to switch to northern accents for Sean Bean.
Yeah. But so it's like, he does a great job in How to Train Your Dragon, and you don't have to worry about the facial pout. It's all in the voice, which he is good at.
Yeah, and let's face it, he was hired to be Pouty McShiny Hair.
Pretty much.
And he's always hired to be Pouty McShiny Hair. It was the same problem in the Eternals. Another hot mess directed by a woman. Holy crap. People dump on Thor 2. The Eternals was a fucking mess, man.
Okay, I've said this before. Thor 2 is great as like an 80s fantasy pastiche.
Right.
Like that's what it is. Just
the problem
really
with
high
Thor,
production values.
The problem with Thor 2 is that was the period, because James Gunn did so well with Guardians of the Galaxy that they were hiring TV directors to make the jump to film. And so they hired, ironically, a Game of Thrones director to direct Thor 2.
I thought Guardians of the Galaxy came out after Dark World.
Oh, it's possible. But that was the period, right? That they were giving people chances, because there's so much CGI in those films.
Oh no, it was after, because we got the Collector in the end credits.
Yeah. Now, I mean, for every James Gunn and Bryce Dallas Howard, you get a bunch of people who know that experience matters, that ability to really. And I mean, the director of Thor 2, the fact that nobody knows his name is telling, because he was the one that had to come after Kenneth Branagh, who knew exactly what he wanted to do with that first Thor movie. And I don't care what anybody says, it was friggin' good. I'm seeing more people go back and appreciate what they did with that first movie, because it was small and it was modestly budgeted and it was acting focused. And I think, that's an example of people. There's this really double-edged sword mantra in entertainment, which you have to keep in mind, because there is some truth to it, but it can really bite you. And it's, people don't know what they want until you give it to them. And so, if you ask a bunch of Marvel Comics Thor fans what you wanted a Thor, I want him punching stuff, and I want him fighting stuff, and I want him to be strong, and I want him to be throwing the hammer and all that stuff. And, then when they get it, everybody finds something to complain about, because Marvel fans, right? That's why, you hear all this stuff about legitimate criticism being washed away by a bunch of other stuff. But the truth is that, I think the Eternals was pretty panned when it came out, but we're going to get more fucking Eternals, because the art, they have woven that shit all through the other movies. And every time I see those concentric circles Eternal designs, like the spirograph shit, I'm like, oh God, no. Like, they made that so central to whatever's coming, that I'm just like, shit, man, I don't want more Robb Stark and Jon Snow with fewer facial expressions. Fucking God. And that's what the Eternals is. It's funny how the same problems jumped, because obviously they were going for the same audience. And that's the thing, that whole people don't know what they want until they give it to them. It's true with a lot of these things. And that's why I think a lot of these shows, like Once Upon a Time, devolve, because they had this concept for the first season, and it was interesting.
And it's kind of funny, because it was when I first got into Once Upon a Time, when that first season happened, and that was when I first learned that about the 5-year plan in TV shows, which is usually you have 5 seasons planned out, but
it never survives first contact is the thing. They want you to have it so you have some basic idea where it's going, but it does change.
True, but like days after I first learned about that, I was actually reading an interview with the creators, and they were like, oh yeah, we don't actually have a plan.
They didn't think that show was going to be a big as hit as it was.
Which is understandable.
I don't know. I really thought Lana Parrilla was such a breakout in that show.
Well, I mean, obviously, by the time, so I think it was about a year and a half ago now, I sat down and said, okay, I'm going to watch the whole series.
Yeah.
Because I'd only seen a couple seasons, and then stuff happened. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to watch the whole series. By the time I got to season 5.
Season 5 was horrendously bad.
The only thing that kept me going was Regina
and Gold. And even he, like, Mr. Gold is the Fonzie of that show.
I was sick of Gold and his back and forth, and I wanted Belle to just stab the dagger through his heart and go live her life.
I got so sick. I was hoping for a miracle until they broke up Regina and, was it Robin
Hood?
Yeah. That, to me, because I thought they missed, and this is what I'm saying about, they had this show, there was all this fan response, and Once Upon a Time both got too wedded to its concept and wasn't flexible enough, but then they got way too fan servicey, where they obviously just kept watching the internet and throwing the characters in that people said they wanted, with no plan.
And one of the worst things for me was, I would sit there and watch it, and I would start making a game of it, where I'm like, okay, there's a twist coming. What's the obvious twist? What's it obviously going to be? But then what is the twist itself going to be? Because the twists themselves were so obvious. Like, I specifically remember Merlin and Nimue, and I'm watching it, and it was hinting like, oh, this person is going to become the first Dark One. And I'm like, no, it's going to be Nimue.
Yeah, that,
because it's
and that Camelot season went on too long.
Okay, look, if it was one thing to try and divorce the Holy Grail from Christian mythology.
Right.
Divorcing Arthur from Christian mythology, you've already set yourself a really difficult task.
It was so, they couldn't find a truly new thing to say about Camelot.
No, except, I'm sorry, it really felt like it's ruled by a man, so it's bad. And right. I feel that show was one of the first big victims of this whole pop feminism thing, where it's like, oh, this is becoming really popular.
Yeah.
And people want female representation and they want female power. And we're going to do that, but we're going to do it in the cheapest way possible. And what it really felt like was they cheapened the men in order to make it work.
And yet they also stepped on a rake in terms of theory, because the premise of the show, and this is the thing that fucks up girls throughout their entire lives, is the idea that you are inherently something. You don't learn, you don't change. You're inherently talented or not. You're inherently good or you're inherently wicked, and you can't change that. And they did that with Regina and Snow. And some of the things Snow does and Emma does are so selfish and irritating. And the fact that they were just default good and Regina was default bad, so they get the stuff and Regina doesn't. I just wanted to throw my remote at the TV.
And that was the problem with killing Robin Hood, is it's like, I'm guessing the actor wanted to leave. That's really the only explanation for why they did it, unless they were just trying to torture Regina.
I got the sense they were trying to torture Regina, because, oh my God, fucking Hook. That guy should have been gone after a season. He should definitely not have become Captain Guideline or the love interest.
I liked Emma and Hook in theory.
I liked that he existed to get hit in the face by women. That was a run-on joke for a while. I thought the actor did it really well, but Hook is fucking despicable.
That's true. And the problem is he keeps, and they do the same thing with him that the comics did with Gambit in X-Men for a while, where it's, I'm going to keep betraying the good guys, but then it's going to turn out that I actually have a valid reason for it.
And he gets redeemed, and Gold gets redeemed, but Regina doesn't. It's anti-feminist. It's not actually feminist.
And here's the thing, like, in the end, we're supposed to think Regina got her happy ending because she becomes queen of the United Realms or whatever. Like, literally,
that wasn't what she wanted.
No, she wanted to be loved. And yes, she has a
consolation prize. Yeah, like, what did they forget the story they were telling, right?
Yeah, and for me, it's also, in the end, they put her in that, it's like this light mauve gown. And I'm pretty sure it's white, but the lighting made it kind of really light purple.
See, yeah,
but I'm like,
oh yeah, that weird. It was like, what color is this dress? Yellow or purple kind of color?
And it's so very much a snow dress, and it's like, for me, it's like, I love dark colors. I love jewel tones. And that's part of what I love about Regina's wardrobe. And I'm like, why can't she still have a dark dress? It doesn't have to be black, but why can't she have like a burgundy Merlot
that's
dress as she becomes queen? Exactly. And so it's like, no, it had to be a dress that looked like it was made for Snow.
And see, I would have ended it the same way. Remember, I said they were hinting at these themes of different types of true love. It would have been great had Regina and Snow or whoever, but Regina actually found some friends who could validate her and make her realize that ambition is not bad, and you can balance relationships with, and maybe this is just my own wish fulfillment that I keep trying to find in media, and because leadership is really lonely. And I don't want to make this about me, honest to God, but it's just true that sometimes leadership is lonely. Sometimes you have to make tough calls. But you know what? If you are willing to take the chances with people, you do get people who have your back. There is this false choice that you have to be the Wicked Queen or Snow White all the fucking time. And I ended up starting to go, okay, let's look at different male leaders and see what they do. And I'm going to pull some stuff from that. And you know what? It kind of works. Now, I study Peter Baelish a little too much, but that's just because he's the same Myers-Briggs thing as me. And it's like, okay, without the fucking evil, how does he use situational stuff and allies and relationships and a whorehouse to get what he wants when he has no title, he has no status? This is the path. This is the way for him. Right?
Because intelligence is a tool.
Yeah.
He used it poorly for wrongful.
Well, he
used it for evil, like you said. But that doesn't mean the intelligence is wrong.
He used it well, but his bitterness took him over. That was the way I took it, because he didn't actually form bonds with people because he never got over Catelyn Stark, right?
And I mean, that's what the whole thing hinges on, which it feels a bit timely.
He would have been fine if he had not married Sansa to Ramsay Bolton. That was his big mistake. Everything else, he was on the upswing.
And again, that one was purely the showrunners.
Yeah, because that didn't happen in the books, did it?
No, in the book, it's a decoy
character. Yeah,
it's like Jane Poole, I think.
Yeah, that's because they had a fake Arya and a fake Sansa in the books. I mean, I do see that something had to happen to Sansa. She had been way too fucking lucky up until that point. But, you know, I think people got a little complacent with Sansa because she was so plot armored in the books. But where she ends up in the show, I didn't like Sansa through most of the series, but at least there she was through something. And I wouldn't have bought where she ends up in the story as quote unquote Queen of the North if shit hadn't gone down with her. And the interesting thing there, like that, it's interesting because the whole Battle of the Bastards episode, it's the best episode of Game of Thrones. Best single episode of Game of Thrones with all of it. Because it's got the political intrigue, it's got the great one-liners, but it's also got that fucking awesome battle sequence. It was just so amazing. But that is also, it was kind of hot messy for 2 seasons, 3 seasons before that. It becomes a fucking hot mess afterwards, because then it's season 7 and season 8, and holy shit, what happened?
It is generally acknowledged that like season 4 was where it started to go wrong.
Well, that was when they started combining storylines, but also storyline, it got too big. And this has always been the fear about adapting fantasy, is all those storylines where the characters are kind of, you know, spread to the winds. It's really hard to keep cohesion. It's the same problem Rings of Power has, just too many fucking storylines. That show's a hot mess.
Okay, look, that show is a hot mess because the writers, the showrunners are genuinely clueless.
Oh yeah.
The fact that they admitted in an interview and said, oh yeah, we didn't realize that in TV everything needs to weave together and all the stories need to work together. And I'm like, this is why you haven't had any of your movies made in the past 10 years, despite trying to sell scripts, because you clearly don't know the basics of storytelling.
Well, yeah, I mean, movies have to weave together too. Game of Thrones had that problem as well, because you see in the adaptation, you notice that the main character in the scene is not doing much if you actually stop and pay attention. There are so many scenes like, you know, Tyrion gets knocked out of the battle and Jon Snow gets trampled in the battle, because in the book they're point of view characters. And they never really solve the problem of how to adapt a point of view character structure to TV. And that's why Jon Snow knows nothing and does nothing through most of the fucking show, except make terrible decisions and be really fucking lucky. Like Jon Snow is just, I mean, between Jon Snow and Sam Tarly on that show, you can see George Martin's wish fulfillment about mediocre men. At least Sam was legit smart, but like it just really, oh, you're meant for this. You come from the right families, or you know, you are special somehow, and therefore you're gonna do great, even though, let's face it, you have no business fucking being here. And women don't get that. Like, compared to Daenerys, who, yeah, she's a monster from the friggin' beginning. You understand why. I was so surprised at the reaction of that episode. I think her fucking Dracarys in King's Landing was the right call. And I didn't think it was a heel turn. But people wanted the girl riding a dragon, and because she's got the blonde hair, and because she's the princess and all that stuff, oh, she must be good. I don't even think it through the whole thing.
I don't even think it was just that, because like I was on Tumblr at that, not when the last season came out, but like when Game of Thrones was really, really big.
Yeah.
And everyone was just like, oh, this is so women empowerment. It's feminist.
She's damaged.
Yeah. And it's like, they were like, oh, she's a badass woman and she's using men, like with Dario. And
I thought they were using each other.
I mean, what pretty much.
Think of Dario, because to me that's a perfect song character, but then they did the switch of the actor.
I didn't actually watch those seasons.
Oh, okay, because the minute he is that sort of barbarian prince. He came up through the fighting pits and everything like that. So but then they switched the actor, and nobody really knows why. But it's too bad you haven't actually seen those seasons, because like I think you'd like him.
I'm gonna be totally honest. I watched season 7 and 8. I watched clips of season 6. I read the first book, and everything else is just kind of clips in the middle.
You know what? You get the gist.
Exactly.
I mean, the only thing you're missing is some really brilliant performances by Peter Dinklage, Lena Headey, and even Natalie Dormer. I think Natalie Dormer is somewhat overrated, but she is good as Marjorie Tyrell. I just have a thing about her, because when that season happened, everybody was like, oh, you're so Marjorie Tyrell. And I'm like, are you fucking serious? No way. I never get those wins. I am not allowed to be the woman of the people. I'm fucking Cersei Lannister. And everyone's like, really? I'm like, you don't understand my fucking life, you guys. And I had to check it, but the way Lena Headey took an on paper completely shit character and made it work. Oh my God, that woman, I am in awe.
And you know what? Good for her for getting paid to just stand and stare out of window while sipping wine in the last couple seasons.
But if you watch her face and you watch her transitions from despair to fear to rage to loss and back again, she must have sat there, looked at the script, gone, it's a really good opportunity. It's a pretty wig and pretty dresses. Holy fuck, this character's cardboard. What do I do?
Especially by those last couple seasons where Cersei was not doing much.
I've seen entire psychological breakdowns of Cersei Lannister detailing how she's actually a textbook narcissist. And of course, that's not what the intention was in the stories. She was just supposed to be this wicked queen trope stock character.
And like the Lannisters are fascinating because Jaime is the dumb one.
Oh my God.
And his father so much wanted Jaime to be his son, to be the one who takes after him. Tyrion is the really smart one. And he is the one who is absolutely just like his father, but his father can't.
Are we talking book Tyrion or show Tyrion?
General.
Because book Tyrion and show Tyrion are different.
True. I mostly know show and kind of general from what I've heard. Because what I did also do a lot of was I listened to like theories about the books.
Okay. Yeah. See, Tyrion in the books, you understand why Sansa's disgusted, because he's this like real, like ugly alcoholic dwarf with no nose.
Okay, so show Tyrion is very much his father's son. Okay. And
kinda. He doesn't have that killer's instinct, and I actually think that makes him better.
Yes, but he has the intelligence.
You think Tywin Lannister's smart?
It's not even that. It's Tywin has this focus on his family, and he has enough strategy to, and yes, part of it is through sheer viciousness.
Yeah.
But it's like he was able to bring his family up into one of the most powerful positions in the kingdoms.
You know what? That's something House of the Dragon kind of took away from him, because they're already there in House of the Dragon. And I was like, oh, shit. Yeah.
Now, it could be a situation where the Lannisters had power and then they lost it. Because, like, especially we know that Tywin's father was a complete fool.
Yeah.
Who just... I've seen arguments that Tywin actually doesn't understand the power of his father and the strength in that, because his father didn't really let anything bother him. Like, if someone made a joke about him and they laughed, he was just kind of like, whatever.
I saw that as who Tyrion took after.
I can see that.
Yeah.
So, but the child who is most like Tywin is Cersei.
Oh, yeah.
And he can't see that because he's so... And it's very much like Henry VIII and his daughter Elizabeth, where, you know, the court astrologers told Henry and Anne when she was pregnant, she's pregnant with a son. It's all the indications, the stars say it. She's carrying the son, and that's why Anne was crowned. Anne Boleyn, to be clear, I realized. So Anne Boleyn was crowned with this special, I think it's the King Edward's crown, where it's reserved solely for the crown prince, because everyone believed and was convinced she was carrying Henry's son and the heir to the kingdom. And that's why when it was a girl, it was a complete disappointment, and her and Henry's relationship completely devolved from there. I could say a lot about their relationship and their personalities, and yet I won't go off on that. It's kind of a pet topic for me. But what you realize when you look back is, while they were saying, oh, this is the son. Yeah. Well, Elizabeth was Henry's daughter. Yeah. She was the best of him. She became his legacy. She became the greatest ruler England has ever had by many accounts.
See, this was the one thing that, you know, George R. R. Martin always says, it's history, it's history, it's history, to cover over all his kinks. But that was a nuance of history that he didn't... I think they're maybe doing it more in House of the Dragon, but still... Elizabeth I was, you're right, one of the greatest rulers ever, and also the end of the Tudor line.
Yes. But, you know, it could be argued that at the same time, the fact she is the end of the Tudor line is Henry's fault, because she saw the way Henry treated her mother and his other wives, and she said, I'll never put myself at the mercy of a man like that. Whereas if Henry had been a bit more of a better husband, Elizabeth might have been able to find a spouse and say, okay, do the Queen Victoria thing, basically. I'll be the queen, you'll be my prince consort, I will still be in control, I'll still have the power, and my children will be my heirs, not yours.
It's funny, because to me, the best line in House of the Dragon is, history doesn't remember blood, it remembers names. And
that line was eye-opening for me.
Well, the series just defies it, right? Because they're all fighting over blood. Like, okay, Mr. History remembers names. Why did you marry your gay son off into, you know, a doomed relationship?
Yeah.
You know, and it's a cope. The line is a cope, but I really think that, I mean, Elizabeth I historically, and this is what drives me crazy about Martin, he's drawing from history, but he's taking all the wrong lessons from it. He's losing the nuance. And so to me, his stories end up being hot messes because he has a very superficial view of history instead of a more nuanced one. Because all these people fighting over bloodlines, those royal families in Westeros are so inbred. They all have some Targaryen blood in them.
And that's
all of them.
Like that's the one thing the show forgets, and why the race bending for the Valerians doesn't quite work, is because it glosses over that Jaehaerys' mother was Valyrian. So it's like,
well, I want to know how Jon Snow ended up with, well, I guess that's why they give Rhaenyra's kids black hair, because it's the woman. I don't know the genealogy, the way that works in Game of Thrones, but there are so many weird things that I get in a lot of trouble for mentioning. People freak out on me when I point out certain things about Game of Thrones. They reserve the right to freak out about the things they want, but you know, they don't point out that Bravos, those are Sephardic Jews. It's history. The only people in that period, in that part of the world, that could lend money with interest were Jews. The Muslims can't do usury. The Christians can't do usury. Bravos is based on the Jews setting up the banking systems in the entire North African world. And Pedro Pascal and Indira Varma being awesome do not change that, right? And people get really mad at me when I point that out. And that's why Martin hiding behind history bothers me, because I could totally ignore that and just go, okay, it's a pastiche. He didn't hide behind history to justify all the rape and incest, which is not even accurate historically.
No, it's not.
They knew too much incest was a problem.
And I will say this, it's not just Martin.
No.
Because have you heard of Philippa Gregory?
Yep.
Okay. I hear from your voice that you have some of the same issues I do.
Yeah.
She loves reveling in that.
Who else? Well, it's we all know. We all have our fetishes. We all have our kinks. We appeal to it. It's something that we're validating in ourselves, right?
She leans into a lot of the exact same things Martin does. I mean,
yeah,
it's like with the other Boleyn girl, it's, you know, she does actually go with and slept with her brother to try and conceive a son.
Now, okay, and this is maybe just my bias, I see it a little differently when a woman's doing it. And okay, I don't know what Philippa Gregory's actual gender identity is by her writing. There's some ish there, you know. Anne Rice
the man.
That
would be hilarious.
Anne Rice was working some shit out, but you know, when you're the receiver, for instance, it is a completely different psychology than, you know, that's a removal of social responsibility fantasy as opposed to a power fantasy. And you know, with that, the whole Cersei, the only people she can trust is her family thing, it explains it, it doesn't excuse it. I think you see it, they sold it much better with Daemon and Rhaenyra than as bad as those scenes were. Like, what a disappointing getting together sequence. Oh my god, so bad. worst episode ever. So bad.
No.
Day for night, bad, no sizzle, no, like, if you're gonna say let's burn together, there better be some fire there, man. Like, that was just not cool.
I mean, that scene needed so much more passion and much better lighting, and it just needed both of them to be so much more involved and a kind of joy to it.
I think they shot it so early that they hadn't clicked as like performers yet.
There's that, but like, I will still blame the people who storyboarded it for not coming up with something more interesting.
You when you're doing that, you encourage the actors to hang out together. I mean, that's the real problem with film style shooting, as opposed to serialized television or plays. At least in plays, you get rehearsals. You've got 6 weeks to know the person you're supposed to be feeling things for, right?
Yeah.
And it's not a question of developing an actual personal relationship. It's understanding their rhythms and instincts as a performer. So you're not bashing into each other, you're moving with each other. And I mean, that was so, I felt bad for them in that scene. I felt so bad because they're both very talented. And in other scenes, like those later scenes with those little gestures that Matt Smith suggested, it worked. The smaller stuff worked more, but Matt Smith is injecting a nuance the same way Dinklage did in his performance. He's injecting a nuance that you don't get in the source material, and part of that, it's the same way. Have you seen the Tim Burton Sweeney Todd?
Bits of it.
That movie is, I would teach that as an example of what happens when a director is not focused on the performances. And one of the things I found interesting in Alan Rickman's diary, I still feel like that's a huge violation of his privacy, but maybe he okayed it before he died. I don't know. It was just weird.
I kind of doubt it, just because I remember
he was such a private person.
Yeah, and especially his comments about Emma Watson.
I think he would not want anyone to have seen those.
Exactly.
Yeah, and just no. That was a complaint. That was part of his ongoing complaints about the process, not her. Those were taken out of context, because one of his big issues with the whole Harry Potter factory was that they were so fixated on the macro, the big special effects set pieces, the sweeping shot of the hall, that they wouldn't focus on the actual acting until the 4th take.
Yeah. And for me, it's like, I don't judge him for having negative thoughts about someone else, because we all do.
Oh yeah, and in context, the comment made sense. It wasn't about her; she was a child.
Yeah, and like I remember you being a bit disappointed about it when you first heard it.
When it first came out, it's like, oh man, because I worship him as a technical actor.
He's great.
I have learned so much from him doing interviews on Process. He's an inspiration in that way, and so to see that side of him, it's like, wow, he was kind of a dick. But then I actually got got the bit in context. He's still kind of a dick, but he's a dick for a reason.
Yeah, but I mean, we all have those moments, and I think
also keep in mind that this was a guy who in theater school was told, and everybody has like music school, drama, theater school, like damage. This was a guy who was told, you'll never make it as an actor because you sound like you're speaking out of the back end of a drain pipe.
My God.
Voice, yeah, that was a thing for him. So in context of that and reading it in context, I think he was sort of going, why are you letting this girl be set at the mercy of the critics by letting her sound this way? And I think he doesn't realize that the primary market for that movie was not Britain.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, we all have those thoughts. The thoughts don't make us a jerk. It's what we do with them. And like, if you just put them in your private diary,
we all
that doesn't make you a jerk.
Yeah.
And that's why I was like, why are they publishing this? Like, if
Yeah.
these are his private thoughts,
Yeah.
and people are going to judge, they have no right to judge him on that, because if he never said it out loud,
I think that was the core of my comments of this was not for public consumption.
Mhm.
You know, and if he was okay with this being public consumption, he's an asshole. But it doesn't seem, nobody seems to know who okayed the publication of these things. And I mean, I do find it interesting because he seemingly enjoyed his time on Sweeney Todd, even though he reacted to the shaving cream. And like, for me, having been in that situation where I'm in physical distress and directors didn't give a shit, I was like, what is wrong with Tim Burton in that moment? There's a thing with Tim Burton that he lets his actors agonize. I mean, why was Jenna Ortega working sick as a dog on that dance scene? Like, she took shit for it. That's not her. That's the production not going, all right, maybe we should delay. I mean, maybe there were financial considerations. I don't know, but holy crap. But you watch Sweeney Todd, Johnny Depp and Helena Bonham Carter are in the same movie. The two younger actors are in the same movie. Alan Rickman is in a completely different movie with his Turpin. And it is a brilliant fucking Judge Turpin, but it doesn't fit the rest of the movie at all. And it wasn't the sort of, you know, he was in a completely different movie when he did Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves too, right? But they let him rewrite things so that it gelled with what he was doing. The whole movie got pulled along with him. In Sweeney Todd, it doesn't. So you have this really amazing, nuanced, fresh take on a character that everybody goes in thinking they know, alongside a whole bunch of big, broad set pieces. And I spent a lot of the movie going, I would love to see an entire movie in the Judge Turpin universe, not a typical Tim Burton thing. And as much as I appreciated that performance, I don't feel like it got its due because a lot of people thought he was flat.
Yeah. And the movie itself is kind of
all over the place. It's all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah. Musical fans say it didn't live up to expectations, and non-musical fans miss out on a lot of the details.
It's another one of those ones where they didn't get singers.
And I'm so sick of that in musical movies. And that's one of the biggest mistakes they make. And it's part of it is, it's like, and I see this in voice acting too, where it's like, we're going to get the biggest name we can to have a draw to this movie. And I'm like, but they're not actually qualified. As a side note, speaking about Sweeney Todd, have you seen the latest stunt casting they've done for the Broadway run?
No.
Josh Groban as Sweeney Todd.
Maybe.
I'm vaguely fascinated by it.
I after Heath Ledger as the Joker, I will never prejudge anyone. There are some I'm like, I have concerns, but
yeah. Well, it's like when I heard about that, I'm like, huh? And then I'm like, you know what? If you play with that could be interesting.
Well, if you do sort of a Dorian Gray take on Sweeney Todd, that could be interesting. That you don't see him coming. He doesn't look demonic. He seems like a nice guy. And then, whoops, you know. I mean, I don't mind.
Sorry.
No problem. I'm surprised I haven't been coughing either.
Well, I laughed and got
the
spray in the back of my throat.
Yeah. We're both kind of hot messes today. It's the middle of winter. We're all in goblin mode. But I mean, it was funny because have you ever seen that show Penny Dreadful?
No, it seemed a bit too dark for me.
See, I think there's elements of it you'd absolutely love, but it is very, very dark. But the guy who plays Dorian Gray was in the Broadway run of SpiderMan. And I don't know if he's legit the worst part of it and just wasn't up to the part's terrible. It's very.
Was it Reeve Carney?
Yes.
I have really mixed feelings on Reeve Carney.
I do too.
Why does he always look greasy?
He doesn't look greasy in this. I will give him that. He
That's
plays a complete slime ball, but he's very pretty. But I just kept thinking, oh my God, it's Spider-Man.
Well, it's interesting because so Reeve Carney is Peter Parker, and Patrick Page played Norman Osborn, Green Goblin.
Yeah.
And now they were both in the original cast of Hadestown.
Yes.
It's like, okay.
It's funny because I normally don't do that. I was fine with Tom Holland in Uncharted. It took a little bit, but he did play the character different, and they set up the character. I mean, that whole scene where he's like doing push-ups and everything like that, it's like, okay, this is not Spider-Man. This is not but yeah, Reeve Carney, I think because Dorian Gray is one of those characters that I am very picky about. And it's funny because a lot of that show, Dracula, I'm very picky. Very, very picky. Dorian Gray, very picky. And they stayed away from the nuts and bolts of the original Dracula story enough that I could accept that it was just, okay, it's an OC fanfic character played absolutely masterfully by Eva Green. And then, oh God, what's his name? I'm blanking on the actor. The guy who plays Frankenstein's monster in the show is spectacular. And that's the part I want you to see, because they've reimagined the Frankenstein monster as a tragic romantic lead. And he has this ability, the character gets better looking as the show goes on, to the point that he's kind of sexy, even though you know he's not. You're looking at him going, he's pasty faced and like missing a piece of his hair, and he's greasy, and holy shit, I'm buying it. And then the show falls off a cliff in the 3rd season. And I mean, his sort of ending is really cool, but I mean, there's a show that it was all over the place because it was a Penny Dreadful, right? And it ended so abruptly, but the ride is, I think, because the showrunner and the creator of the show was so aware of how Penny Dreadfuls back in the day functioned, despite all the shit, and like there are times that it is deliberately, gratuitously perverse and titillating because it's Penny Dreadfuls, right? It's just, yeah, we're gonna have Dorian Gray and the Wolfman banging. Deal. It's a Penny Dreadful. It's what a Penny Dreadful would be now. It's real because they sort of recognized, okay, what's the titillating, taboo, safe exploration of violation of social norms for young men with income now? Premium cable. Let's fucking go. And so the mess there works, but then they tried to do Penny Dreadful's City of Angels in Los Angeles during, I think it was the 30s. And despite it being beautiful, oh my God, it didn't come together.
That feels a little too late for something like that.
I think it's the tropes they were dealing with there, instead of it being retellings of familiar characters, they were trying to introduce syncretic Latin American esoterica, magic, and the occult, using Natalie Dormer as their deity. And why was it Natalie Dormer? It's imported. It should have been a Latina.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.